Hello, my name is Brenna. This video is a response to an investigation about compassion and what it means to be compassionate to different individuals. If you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Tracy Lubes. I am the principal at Clare Elementary School. I taught in the classroom elementary school students for 22 years, and I've been the principal there for 7 years. Compassion is what I do every day with kids.
All right, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Very first one is, how would you personally define compassion?
I think that it's compassion is similar to empathy and kindness in that you care very deeply about someone's circumstance and their situation. However, compassion is a draw to action, if you will. So you can empathize with someone's circumstance and think, wow, I can imagine what it would be like to be that person. But then when you have compassion, you want to do something about it, whether that be get them what they need or take them up someplace that, if they don't have transportation, or if they're struggling with something, you figure out a way to get that. So what you're doing is helping within their suffering to help make things better.
So you would say it's more action oriented than just offering, advice or kind words?
Absolutely.
What do you think makes compassion different from empathy or kindness? Because we just touched on this a little bit, but
We did. I think empathy is much more of an emotional response or a feeling. You attempt to understand someone's circumstance, but yeah, compassion, becomes more of a call to action. Kindness is, I think, something that we do and we exhibit. I teach kids every day to use kind words because that's lost in a lot of people lately. But kindness can be something that we just do and be, but you don't have to have necessarily compassion for another circumstance to be kind.
Right.
You can just be kind, standing in the grocery line and say hello to someone or offer to help. But compassion becomes, if you notice they're struggling to pay for their groceries, now you end up helping pay for their groceries because you're being compassionate to their circumstance.
Right. Can you share an experience when you felt genuine compassion from someone else?
Yeah. Well, just recently I was in the hospital and there was compassion everywhere. Nurses, doctors, every staff member there at the hospital. I did not feel from any one person that they weren't there to try and help support me. And when I would say thank you or I would be, very gracious, it was, well, that's my job. And I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Right.
I think you can express compassion, without it being just, well, it's just what I do. I think people, when you go into a profession like that, you just automatically are compassionate.
Yes.
Yeah.
There can be vanilla nurses, or there can be, twist nurses, double chocolate twist nurses.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yes. What motivates you to show compassion towards others?
Well, I think for me, it's always been about making someone else's day a little better. Again, like I say, if I'm standing in the grocery store, giving somebody a smile or sharing a smile along the way, it just makes people feel better than the grumbly face. But for me, it just is, it's all about our world is just not in a good place. It's been pretty ugly for a while. So anytime I think we can be compassionate towards others or we can show them kindness, then, we're just making things better all the way around.
Even just sharing a smile.
Exactly.
Do you think compassion is something people are born with or something that can be learned?
Honestly, I think it's both. I think there are people in the world who are they just naturally are kind. They just naturally care for people. They just naturally want to help people in every circumstance. But then I also think because I'm an educator, I've spent my life work trying to teach young kids that kindness is free.
Yeah.
And if we can be kind to each other, then we can get out of a lot of different circumstances just by using kind words or trying to figure out a way to solve a problem being kind. So I think we can do both.
How do you think compassion is expressed or valued in your culture or community?
That's a hard one because I find that we have less and less compassion. For instance, I get phone calls from parents as a principal of a school, and they're on fire for some circumstance that has happened. Their little 6-year-old came out to the car at the end of the day and tried to explain to them that another student got mad at them. Instantly, they're calling me, screaming at me. My kid got bullied today, those kinds of things. And so trying to walk people back through a situation is hard. It's just really hard. But I think sometimes when you talk about different cultures and different places, I think it depends oftentimes on the circumstances of people too.
Yeah.
If that parent had a bad day, or they now have their kids climb in the car and they're upset,
Right.
how do you talk them down
It
from that?
unravels.
Yeah, so I think our job then is to model back compassion, irregardless of what the culture or the circumstance or wherever we're at. If we model compassion, we use compassion, it's going to be returned.
Do you think unraveling the situation with compassion typically is more successful?
Always.
Just being calm and
Always. We collect a lot more bees with honey than we do with vinegar, for sure.
Yes.
I think it actually makes people more mad sometimes that I am just very patient and kind and try to explain and understand.
Right.
Okay, let's talk it through before we get all upset.
Yeah.
So
specifically in your profession, have you noticed differences in how people from different backgrounds show compassion? Maybe someone who is more fortunate, a kiddo that's more fortunate, or do you think maybe kids who are less fortunate show more compassion because they're more grateful for being at school or for receiving the help?
I don't necessarily think it's either or. I've seen it in both circumstances. I think it's just something that we have to teach and model for kids. I can't identify a place where I've actually seen it one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
I do recall a situation where I worked with a classroom of students that had very specific special needs. And my students, we went to that classroom, and some of my toughest or lowest socioeconomic kids identified better with our special needs kids than maybe some of our affluent kids who have everything, and they were like, I don't know how to identify with this child that's in a wheelchair or who isn't speaking. Right. So maybe it is a cultural piece, or but then I've had other times where I've had kids that that have come from rough situations, and they just don't know what compassion is. They don't know how to be compassionate in any circumstance.
They weren't shown compassion.
Yeah, they weren't provided that. Yep.
Okay. How does modern technology influence the way we show compassion today? Is it a negative or a positive way? Do you think maybe both?
I was going to say, again, I'm going to say it's both. I have seen both. I had a teacher a couple years ago who was really struggling, and I had several parents that took to social media and really just blasted her and the things that she was doing based on what their kids were saying to them.
Right.
And I felt so bad for her because they had never once talked to her. They hadn't come to observe in her classroom. But then in other circumstances, you might go to social media or watch a TikTok or something where you see an example of true compassion, or where a family stopped what they were doing to rake the leaves of an elderly person because they knew that person wasn't well enough to do it. That's just an example, but so I think we can show examples of compassion on social media, but I also think that social media is a place it's a safe platform where people can
right.
Anonymously,
yeah,
they can anonymously hide behind their thoughts. So
it could be positive or negative.
Yeah, for sure.
Can you recall a time when showing compassion was difficult for you?
Yeah. I had a student many years ago who struggled. He was very angry. And he would do okay, start the day, but then when when the cognitive demand grew in the classroom and he couldn't do the work, he would become more and more frustrated, to the point where at times he would throw chairs. He would, and I had to evacuate the rest of the kids in the classroom. And although I could be real calm with him in the moment, sometimes it was really frustrating to be like, the next day, all right, it's a brand new day. And I do that. We do that every day. But for this particular student, after a while, it wore you down. You know, like, I'm not sure how I can say to you, all right, today we're going to have a good day, when somewhere in the back of my mind thinking, maybe it's not
Yeah.
going to be a good day. Later on, I had met with his parents and recognized that his dad had the word hate tattooed on his fingers. And the mom, you know, they just weren't giving him the role model of anybody that was, you know, that was going to care about other people or be compassionate. So it was like, I have to teach this child what this looks like, but do I have it in myself to teach, you know,
Right.
to teach and show him the kind of compassion. Yes, I would model it for him every day, but sometimes that gets to be really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easier to, work or build on a foundation that's already been created, but it's harder, start from the bottom to the top. So.
Absolutely.
How do you think you balance compassion with self-compassion?
To be honest with you, I'm not very good at it. As a school principal, my job is to build up my teachers and my kids. That's my job, and I think I do it very well. And I set aside my own stuff to be able to do that for them. I recognize in myself that, you know, that day where you wake up and it's pouring rain and you're thinking, I just really don't want to go to work today. But the minute I walk up to the door and I open the door and there are kids or adults there, instantly it's good morning, how are you? I'm so glad you're here. So sometimes that, you know, you're finding and building compassion that really wasn't there.
Right.
So I'm getting better at it though. Over time, I've realized that I can't fill other people's buckets from an empty bucket.
Yes.
So I need to, you know, I have been doing things that are much more fulfilling for myself so that I can be compassionate towards others.
Is there any like music, walks? Is there anything particularly that you gravitate to help
All of it.
rebuild compassion?
Definitely music. Sometimes I just like to play a game on my phone or do, you know, just to get away. Sometimes, you know, just getting caught up with my own work sometimes is fulfilled. Like, okay, I can take a breath.
Right.
But the biggest piece that, fills me is spending time with my family and my kids. So whenever I can do that, I know I'm ready to tackle the next situation.
Very last question: who has been a role model for compassion in your own life?
Well, I think the biggest role model I ever lived with was my grandma. She was one of the most compassionate people I've ever met. It didn't matter who you were or what you stood for. She just always had a plate of cookies for you, or come on in, I'll cook you a meal. She tried to find the good in everyone, and I've tried to then share that with my own kids, and watching my own kids find compassion and kindness for other people. All three of my kids do that in a different lens, and it's fun to watch. And so then you know that you're taking the role model that you were built and then sharing it with others so that it can grow. It's kind of that ripple effect on the water.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview today.
Thanks for asking
Appreciate
me. Yeah, absolutely.